And today my partner and I will be presenting on corpse disposal. The name of our presentation is The Circle of Life. There are two primary methods of corpse disposal in the United States. I will be going over cremation. Cremation is the burning of a corpse until only ashes and possibly burned fragments are left. See me here? According to the Cremation Association North America, in the 1960s, cremation was at about 35%, and by 2011, it was at a whopping 42% mark. So how does cremation work? The deceased is placed into a combustible container, and the container is placed into a furnace. The body bakes for about 1 to 4 hours, and at the end of this process, there are about 3 to 9 pounds of ashes and bone fragments left. The bone fragments are placed into a grinder so that they are to become a powdery like ash as well, placed into an urn to be given to the deceased family. So, there are policies that we researched about cremation. There are no policies that we found that were based on the environmental effects of cremation or the environmental side, much more so the financial and side of it and what the deceased family can do with those cremains. Like, for instance, if you were to scatter them out into ocean, this is one that's loosely related to the environmental effects, that you have to go a certain amount of miles out, such as 3 miles, but it varies by state. It varies by state. So, the history of cremation. Cremation dates back to the early Stone Age. However, the modern version of cremation was produced by Professor Brunetti of Italy in 1873 at the Vienna Exposition. Moving forward, the environmental effects of cremation. So here, please. Thank you. So, a lot of people choose cremation as a method of handling corpses because it's considered cheaper than the conventional ground burials, which that is so. However, it is not a greener way because it uses non-renewable resources such as fossil fuels. It releases carbon dioxide in the air, thus harming the environment. It pollutes the air with carcinogens and volatile acids such as monoxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, and hydrogen chloride.
Hello guys, my name is Gais, and I'll be presenting on conventional ground burials. Conventional ground burials are the most traditional kinds of burials in the United States, which involves the embalmed body, which is placed inside of a casket, metal, inside of the casket being a hybrid of metal and wood. Outside of the casket is a steel or concrete vault, and which is placed 6 feet under. Formaldehyde is the embalming fluid that is used. It's used for final viewing for prospective use. Many may not take this into mind, but the funeral industry is a billion-dollar industry in which cosmetics are involved, embalming processes are involved, funeral expenses, caskets, and as you can see over here, cost of an adult funeral in a ground burial is this dates back from 1960 to 2012. So as you can see, it's in a 50-year time span from 1960 to $708, and then if we fast forward all the way up to 2012, it's $7 grand. So you can see how much the funeral business is increasing year by year. Over here, here are some of the expenses for embalming. Like I stated, use of a hearse, $295. Metal caskets is $2 grand, and the median cost of the funeral, once again, $7 grand. The resources used in ground burials, in a typical cemetery, if you can see it in a smaller perspective, is there's enough casket wood to build 40 plus houses, 900 plus tons of casket steel, 20,000 tons of vault concrete, and enough formalin to fill a small pool. And a good tidbit to know, casket manufacturers on the Environmental Protection Agency's list of top 50 hazardous material waste producers. And here is basically how the ground barrels are set up. And if we see ground barrels in a bigger perspective in the United States, right here, each year conventional funeral and burial practice in the United States result in the use of 77,000 trees, which is 20 million board feet of wood for caskets. And there's enough concrete to create 2-lane highway from San Francisco to Kansas City. There's 1.6 million tons of reinforced concrete for vaults. And there's enough embalming fluid, formaldehyde, to fill over 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And it's very, very cancerous. Back in the Civil War era, in around 1860s up to about 1905, people used to use arsenic for as an embalming fluid with a little bit of mercury. So, and later did they know, it took them 40 years to realize that it was very, very toxic by funeral directors and people around the area. Pertaining to the environmental effects of conventional burials, cemeteries use a lot of biocides, pesticides, and weed killers to make the the grass much more greener. In the United States, we use biocide as a fertilizer to make the grass green. In turn, it affects our groundwater as it seeps down into the soil. Other materials such as caskets, the metals that are involved, so 75% of 2 million caskets that are made every year in the United States, 75% of them are made of metal. So the caskets, caskets are not biodegradable. That's the problem, in which it decays, and all the chemicals that are released from there, including the corpse and the formaldehyde, can detriment the groundwater. Another thing that is a good thing to note is about our bodies and what it contains when it rots. A lot of ammonia is released, nitrate, sulfurous acid, and other organic acids. The use of fertilizers, we inject about, another thing to know, we inject about 3 to 6 gallons of formaldehyde inside of a person, inside of the corpse, I mean, which in turn does affect the environment.
Hello, and as a solution to these issues, we'd like to introduce the idea of green burials. Green burials include the use of sustainable biodegradable clothing, shroud or casket, recyclable paper products, and a gathering in a natural setting. A green cemetery does not permit embalming fluids, herbicides, pesticides, or other environmentally damaging products. So here's a picture of the difference between a natural burial and the standard burial. And we see here that one of the biggest differences is that with a natural burial, the body does not have to be buried as deep. Because it's using a biodegradable casket, it does not have to be buried as deep, because the goal of green burials is to replenish the earth, and when it breaks down, it allows for the soil around it to become fertile. And here we have the standard with the headstone and the carving, the headstone. However, you see here there's a rock, and in green cemeteries they use to mark the plots, they use rocks, trees, different types of things such as that. And if there is no marking there in open fields, they use GPS. So here's an example of a biodegradable casket, in my ideal casket. This biodegradable casket is made of willow, I believe, but they also have bamboo caskets and even cardboard caskets that start for as little as $50 compared to $2,000, $3,000, and $4,000 plus for the conventional burials. And here's an example of a headstone. I'm not sure what type of rock that is, but it's gorgeous. Go down, please. So cremation alternatives. There is a such thing as biocremation. And this is a process of biocremation. So a greener way to return to dust. Instead of being burned, instead of using so many chemicals that are being released, the body's been placed into a solution that uses about 92 gallons of water. And yes, this seems wasteful, but it's not harming our quality of air and other things such as that. The liquid is drained and it's 1,000 times less alkaline than at the start. And the water is heated to about 338 degrees in order for in order to dissolve the body. And here we have the idea of eternal reefs. Eternal reefs, if you're to use the regular form of cremation with the furnace, you can get those ashes. The ashes can be put into a generic reef that's then placed into the water in order to make an ecosystem for other fish.